Welcome to Amy's Sourdough Family.
Hello everybody, this is the perfect sourdough for beginners. It's high in wholemeal flour, which is really absorbent, and it's not very high in water, so it's called a lower hydration, which means that it's really a stiffer dough, which means it's perfect because if you're not used to handling wetter dough, it just makes everything easier. I left my dough here for half an hour, and that's called an autolyse, but don't worry about the fancy wording. And then after half an hour of my flour and water sitting, I then added my sourdough starter and my salt. My starter was nice and bubbly and active, as you can see, and I added it to my dough along with the salt. You could add it separately at half an hour intervals, but that's just a step I tend to skip. And if you're a beginner, don't worry about it either. Now, once you've mixed in your starter and your salt, just make sure you really do mix the mixture well together. You don't want there to be any bits that aren't really well incorporated, because obviously your starter is what's going to make your dough rise, and you don't want any pockets where it's not rising properly. So just really make sure that you're mixing it fully. I used some sea salt here, which is just an added extra in terms of the flavour, but any salt you've got, in my opinion, is absolutely fine. So here I am mixing. It is a stiff dough, as you can see. If you've seen other videos, this really is stiff. So really get your hands in there. If you're not someone who likes getting your hands dirty, don't stress too much. Just use a spoon, but you might find it easy with your hands. So after 15 minutes of letting the dough rest, I started my first set of 4 stretch and folds. I can say that. So you want to stretch it up and fold it back onto itself, do a quarter turn, stretch it up, fold it back onto itself, and just do this 4 times. And then you want to do it at a 15-minute to half an hour interval. I'll be honest, 15 minutes was probably too quick. As you can see, the dough is actually struggling to stretch, and you don't want to rip the dough, and so you really just don't want to coax it too much. So as you could see by the end, I'm just kind of pulling it a little bit, but it's just not very happy. So I would say if you can do it half an hour apart, so within the first 2 hours of your dough resting, you want to do 4 sets of stretch and folds. I did them 15 minutes apart, which meant I did them all within the first hour, and it was just way too much. My dough just wasn't very happy. I mean, it still ended to a nice dough at the end, but because it's a stiffer dough, it just wasn't very happy, as you can see. As you can see there, I'm just like, okay, I'll just leave it after that. It's just not happy, but I just wanted to go to bed. I'll be perfectly honest. Just carrying on with the stretch and folds, and you'll see in a second I just kind of give up with this one. So, oh, okay, that's fine, that'll do. Just do what you can. First rise was 8 to 10 hours total, because it's a bit chilly at the moment. This is after the bulk fermentation. It's not a very jiggly dough, which is why you can see it didn't really jiggle, but it was done. And you can see by the crumb at the end, it's just a tighter crumb, and that's just what happens with lower hydration. It was perfectly even, so don't stress about that. It was a little bit harder as well to get out of my bowl, and again, don't stress. At this point, I know this looks a bit strange, just don't worry about this bit. I'm actually just doing a little experiment. I'm taking off a teeny tiny bit of dough because I am trying to do a baguette, which came out quite nicely. So don't worry about this little bit. But yeah, if you did want to do something, it just shows you that it's quite easy to just separate out a dough. If you wanted to make buns or split it in half and do 2 smaller loaves, you're more than welcome to. So at this point, use gluten-free flour is my major point. So get your fingers with a bit of gluten-free flour and sprinkle the top, and you want to make sure it's nice and over there. And then you want to flip the dough over once you've got it into the place that you want. I've got a dough scraper, but I mean, if you don't have one, don't stress. That's the beauty of this dough. It's quite a stiff dough. And you want to fold it over as if you're kind of folding a piece of paper, the first bit, and then you're taking these 2 bottom sides and you're folding them inwards. Then you're taking the top bit and you're folding it back towards the middle, as you can see on the video, and then you're tucking them both in. This next bit is optional. I'm just kind of stitching the seam a little bit, which is just kind of helps the dough, but it really isn't necessary, especially as I'm not actually keeping it in this shape because I haven't got a banneton of this shape. I'm just going to put it in a bowl, which again is nice and easy and beginner friendly. So I'm just pinching the sides again, just making sure that my dough's kind of all sealed. Helps again to not create massive air pockets, which you don't really want, and that's kind of, it's called tunnelling, but again, don't worry about the technical terms of that. At this point, use either your fingers or a bench scraper in your fingers to sort of lift up and around the dough and put it back to yourself. And the reason we're doing this is to create surface tension, and it really helps to get a better rise in the oven, and also it will help you to do things like score your dough as well with a knife, which we'll do later. But yeah, it really is honestly very helpful. Now, using gluten-free flour, I want you to liberally cover the top of your dough, and this is really going to help it not stick to your tea towel or cheesecloth. You're also going to pre-flour with this same gluten-free flour. Pick your dough up and put it into a high-sided bowl. I'm just showing the gluten-free flour there. Then we're going to stick it in the fridge overnight, or if you're off to work, in the day. And then next morning or later that evening, after your dough has been sat fermenting in the fridge, anything from 6 to 12 hours, then you're going to bring it out and overturn it onto some baking paper, or if you're in America, parchment paper. At this point, you're really going to see the worth of the gluten-free flour and how easily it comes up. There it is. It's beautiful. You can see I'm really happy with how easy it was to get that cheesecloth off my sourdough. Just brush off the excess. Don't worry about that, but yeah. And then we're going to take a very sharp knife and we're going to score it straight down the centre. I'm deliberately using a knife as well. I think it's really beginner friendly. Not everyone has all the bannetons and scorers and everything. So you can see it does a good job as long as you've got a really good sharp knife. And especially with this dough that is, as I repeatedly say, is quite firm. It really does help in terms of the scoring with a knife. And also it being in the fridge overnight really helps to firm up the dough, which just gives that extra ease. Preheating your oven to 230 at this point is essential. I would do it before I take your dough out of the fridge, just so you know, and don't forget to preheat your Dutch oven at the same time. I would say that if you're going to have anything when you're making your sourdough bread, it's a Dutch oven. A Dutch oven is really important, and they come in all forms. As you can see, mine isn't your standard Dutch oven. Put your dough in there and maybe rescore your line if you feel like it's gotten a little bit messy in the process of putting your dough in there. And then, as you can see, I'm just adding a little bit of water, and this really does help your steam. Keeps the dough's crust softer for longer, which really does help your rise in the end. Clap that lid on and get it straight in the oven. Bake it covered for about 20 to 25 minutes and then uncovered for again another 20 minutes, 25, maybe half an hour if you love it really dark. Here it is after the first bake covered, just a little reveal. It's got a nice little rise. I'll put it back in the oven then, completely out of the Dutch oven. Actually, I prefer to do it because I like an even bake all around, and then I bring it out with the oven gloves, and there it is after the second bake. I'm really happy with this crumb. I hope you like it too, and thanks for watching. See you next time.